Back here. Just wanted to do a quick video, hopefully relatively quick here on maybe a couple of the divisional round games. This one's just going to be on the Seahawks and Russell Wilson. Just some kind of generic thoughts up front about the the let Russ cook season. It's funny because early on in the year, he was obviously putting up these crazy numbers. Um, and it's funny too because I think that this gets into a more general topic about football and statistics and why all the takes from stats guys are such a mess and don't really make any sense. Is because the huge problem, the underlying problem with football. You compare it to basketball. It's low scoring opportunity you're talking about. I mean, I don't know what the exact average is, but it's got to be somewhere between like 10 and 15 drives a game. So really 10 to 15 scoring opportunities. And yes, it's drives, not plays that compare to possessions in basketball. So you're talking like 10 to 15 scoring opportunities in a game versus basketball, which is like, I think it's like around 100 per team. So already, hugely small sample. And then 16 games versus 82 games, and so it's funny how little even football stats guys, football in general, just first number one rule about football: very dumb luck based game that that is very hard to figure out what's real and what's not, just in terms of like how to interpret things, which is a huge reason why I think a lot of the quant stuff is so difficult to use. Partly because I think you kind of do need to focus on qualitative things and try to understand why. Because to some extent, it's kind of hard to understand what is happening just in terms of like how important is this. It's harder to use the data to get a hold on what has actually happened because you're dealing in such small samples and such variable samples too. I think 22 guys in a field, different goals of each play, versus in basketball, every possession has the same goal, which is to score, which is like the reality is that's not really the case with each play. Hopefully I'll dive maybe into that idea a little bit more some other time. I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but the point that I wanted to make is that, it should have been obvious to anybody just based on what was happening, like even statistically, that Russ was just insanely hot. And I think you could even see that qualitatively, that what was happening in the beginning of the season, and I'm sure teams have adjusted and all those things, and it would be very interesting to go in and actually, I want to take a look, maybe I'll do a video at some point about like the difference between early season and late season. But like, honestly, Jeff Van Gundy often says about basketball, make or miss league. I honestly think a lot of it just comes down to that, of just like make or miss, your throws, your deep throws, your deep, tough throws into tight windows. And like, it was like when, some guy goes on a run where he shoots 80% from three over, 4 or 5 games. Everyone knows that's going to come back down to earth. But in football, we don't really, because of the lack of volume, you see this all the time where people just overreact to these tiny samples because every week we have to have a take, every 3 games we have to have a take. Whereas in basketball, it's like, oh yeah, it's 4 games. Who gives a shit? In football, a whole season's 16 games, which even in basketball, 16 games, you'd be like, who gives a shit? But in football, we have to pretend that 16 games is a meaningful sample, even though it's probably not. But especially not 4 to 5 games. So, I think the issue a lot of us always had with the let Russ cook movement is that the guy just doesn't really play in structure. And I think you're going to see what I'm talking about in this game. It's not saying he's incapable of playing in structure. Um, and I think the structure thing is like really not well defined and like really not well talked about because so many people are so bad at breaking down film and say things that are ridiculous or just not true, or and it's a combination of some people not knowing what they're looking at, which I'm not saying I always know what I'm looking at. Anyone, outside of like someone who really coaches at like the highest levels, or consistently coaches football still, no one's always going to know what they're looking at. And then two, I think like even coaches can be bad evaluators. Like that's definitely a problem too. I think I see, just not really understanding what's reasonable to ask of a player and what's not reasonable to ask of a player. But I think the thing with Russ is there's just like I said this to a friend, there's just like no sense of like timing and rhythm to his game. And again, not in the sense of like the way that people talk about like Brady or whatever, where it all has to be that way. It's just like he's so unpredictable and un able to kind of feel what the timing of the play is, because so much of the NFL isn't just like, oh, the sail route's open, throw it like to this wide open sail route from a clean pocket, but it is having a sense of like, okay, this isn't quite going how I wanted, but like I know that I still need to get to the, I need to step up in the pocket and then get to the, influence this defender and get to the sail route. Like it's so much more difficult than it is at the college level, but you still have to have some sense of like, what is the goal of this play? What is my timing with my receivers? Even if I can't get there right when I want to, do I have a feel? Do I have a relationship with my players within the structure? There's also the out of structure stuff, like the straight up just like backyard football stuff, which obviously Russ is incredible at, but it's so hard to run an offense at the NFL level solely based on those plays. And I think what you see with Russ is, yeah, there's just so many plays where it's so hard to understand. I mean, I think you can ultimately understand it, but it's not good process. Even sometimes the good plays, it's like, and we'll go through that in this game. I'm mostly going to go through third downs and a couple other big plays, and it's like you can just see his process. Either he doesn't have one or he abandons it so easily, and it's so hard to run a consistent offense when your quarterback um, gets into that sort of it has that play style. Um, I also want to say like I don't want to become overly focused on Russ and I'm not trying to say he's a bad player. A lot of it in this game, I'm gonna break down the plays mostly where I think Russ had trouble and the things that I think he could even just from a process perspective, whether the play would have turned out differently or not, who knows? The things he struggles with. But a lot of it too is just the Rams do a really good job defending. I mean, a lot of the stuff is well. There's a lot of plays that I may or may not show that stuff's just well covered. Russ does a fine job. There's nowhere to go with the ball. Like it's not. Seattle didn't lose this game solely because Russ has no process. But I just this has been the way he's been, and I think anyone saying actually Russ plays great in structure is just like I don't. Again, yeah, maybe you can find games here or there, but like you just don't see games from, a guy like Cam Newton, a guy like Aaron Rodgers, a guy like Tom Brady, a guy like, Drew Brees, whatever. You just don't see games like this from them unless they're just under heavy pressure. And that's the other thing I would say is like, even when those guys are under heavy pressure, like they still kind of go through their process. They don't drop their eyes at phantom pressure like any given moment. They don't, that's the thing with Russ. So much just dropping his eyes and then it's just kind of random where he looks again. It's not like, oh, he dropped his eyes for a second, but he knows this is where he needs to go. Like and I think, maybe a lot of it is just because he's short. I have no idea. That's a decent theory. But yeah, it's just there's so much of just sort of like a disjointed or like schizophrenic nature to the way he plays. And you'll see it here. So, first play here we're going to take a look at. They're gonna run the Rams here are gonna like spin down into they're gonna send five and it's gonna be like three deep, three under, three high coverage. It's pretty obvious from the snap. The Seahawks are gonna get basically a three level stretch to the field here, and let's just run the play. I don't. I'm not saying here that like definitely if Russ tries to throw the sail, it's there because I think that corner who's playing the deep third has eyes on the quarterback. He could definitely break on this ball, but regardless, you see here from Russ, like just watch him in the pocket. They do a good job of picking this up. But he drops his eyes immediately, and he's never, even though you can see the safety here get into the deep middle, he's never getting to the three level stretch. It doesn't look like. Maybe he kind of looks at it. We'll see from the end zone angle. But he just drops his eyes so quickly. And so even if you want to say, okay, he didn't get to this, but he's going to throw this ball to DK, it's like this is late even then. I mean, he gets to the top of his drop, drops his eyes, stops, hitches, then throws. And I'm not big on criticizing guys for being late, but I think, if I make the video I want to make on Tannehill too, you'll see it's like there is examples of guys like this, I think people often pick the wrong players and don't know what they're talking about with stuff like that. But with a guy like Russ, it is true. I mean, look at that. He's holding, shifting, then throwing. So at that point, DK has no chance to make a play. So that's bad enough. But I really just feel like, again, do I know how the play is coached? But I don't want to present myself as though I know absolutely everything about what Russ should be doing here. I don't. But when you look at this guy spinning to the middle of the field, you've got a 3-level stretch. This is what you want. I think it's Olsen puts his hand up. Like, this is there. There's a throw to be made. Like I said, maybe you feel a little uncomfortable with that corner kind of peeking back. But at the very least, Russ needs to look at it. They do a good job. It's 5 guys, but they pick this up. And he feels it even though it's not there. And again, you see with bigger quarterbacks, more comfortable quarterbacks, again, Cam Newton, Tom Brady, they'll stand in there. And either he'll make the throw to this earlier or he'll try to make the throw to the sail. And I mean, again, this is a play where you can say the quarterback failed the structure of the play. There's just no debating it to me. I think you've seen I try to say when there's plays where there really isn't anything for the quarterback to do and people want to put it on the quarterback anyways, there's plenty the quarterback could have done better here, but he's so uncomfortable. He can't both move in the pocket and read the field at the same time, which is what you see from the best guys, the guys who really are great under pressure. And maybe that's just because he's short. That is definitely a reasonable guess, but that's kind of the start of the issues you see, and you're going to see more of it from Russ here. All right, 3rd and 6 here. Rams run some kind of funky looking coverages sometimes, so I always am a little unsure of myself sometimes watching them, where usually it's pretty easy. Though this one I'm pretty confident this is cover 3. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but usually when you see, yeah, pretty confident. So this guy's going to spin to the deep middle, kind of come down here. This is interesting. They're going to push it, 4x1 and run this kind of little like spacing concept. A few things on this play. One, again, this is so tough, but like, I don't know why, but the first thing Russ checks is Metcalf on the backside, and it feels like that is not what he's supposed to do. I could be wrong. Feels like it kind of throws the timing of the playoff. So let's just run it here at regular speed. Oh, sorry, that's on slow-mo. You'll kind of see how it plays out. I'll run it a few times, but it really just feels like, and obviously this is, potentially getting a little nitpicky, though I really don't think so, just in terms of like the timing of this play. He should kind of hit the top of his drop and then be ready to throw. Instead, he hits the top of his drop, checks the backside slant for some reason, and then comes back to the front side, and now there's pressure, so he can't throw the timing routes. Again, both these guys wide open, or wide open. Olsen's not wide open, but for NFL tight end, again, I watched Cam and Greg Olsen play together. That throw is there. I know there's pressure coming, but you can make that throw for sure, especially if Russ isn't kind of hanging onto the ball there so long. Hit the top of your drop, look at Olsen, throw the ball. The ball could be out before that pressure's really in your face. Even as late as he is, though, if he's not so goddamn small, he can just hang in and kind of throw over the top and hit this or this route. I really don't. This is probably a little too late. I think, as wide open as this is, it's probably too late, and he's working probably inside out anyways. But yeah, again, he looks here for some reason, then immediately feels it and stops kind of reading it. Again, I don't disagree, probably just because he's small. But if you can't draw up plays like this, which are really well designed, and get 2 guys open for a first down on 3rd and 6, it's a lot harder to run a functioning pass offense, and you kind of start to see why they're so reliant on deep shots. It's also funny just to see the takes about like, well, they can't run the ball because like they're going to play too high no matter what. But it's like, again, they played plenty of single high, and I know people read that interview, but if they watched the film, they'd also realize that the Rams play plenty of single high. It's not nothing but too high. So I don't know that the idea that the Rams are just never going to play too high because they're committed to it because they don't care about stopping the run, which is also not true. They don't not care about stopping the run. They just have the guys to be able to win one-on-ones in the run game. And if you took that away, I guess Staley would have to reconsider some of his approaches to the game. But yeah, so you can see here, Why is he checking the dig like that? It's a weird, like his head movement is weird too. Why does he kind of like snap that way, snap back? That's not like, that just looks weird. And then again, he kind of immediately drops his eyes at the first sign of a little pressure. The ball, yeah, I don't. Again, this is maybe getting a little bit nitpicky, and I'd be willing to hear that, like, oh, this is, he's under pressure before he can get it out. But again, I think a bigger guy. This is a timing route, short route over the middle of the field. This is the kind of throw you can make with a guy in your face because you don't need to step into the throw. You don't need to drive the ball outside. There's no one driving over the top of the route. You have a big player. He has leverage. I mean, look at the space there. That's open. You can kind of throw it low and away even, but as a short guy, you can't really do those things. So there's just a number of things here that I think kind of speak to the passing game issues for Russ and the Seahawks. All right. So I should have said before too. I mean, almost all of these plays I think are third down plays. And I didn't necessarily pick third down though. I'm not surprised they are third down plays just because I think third down is a great way to judge a passing offense. Sometimes the quarterback, but again, as you've seen with some of the other players, like sometimes third down, the quarterback does everything they can, you still can't convert it. It's a whole offense. I think what you're seeing here is the offense is generating plays to be made on third down, and Russ isn't making them. And I think again, this shows why it's so hard to have a consistent offense with Russ because he on third down, the third to medium, third and long, they know you're going to pass. You're going to get, more aggressive pass rush, more complex coverages, those kinds of things. Although again, I mean, it's not like these teams are playing, it's not like it's such a crazy coverage and the reads are so different than you would expect necessarily on a lot of these plays. They're just going to run mesh sit. And they're going to get exactly the look they want. Metcalf's going to be wide open over the middle of the field. And this is the thing that kind of drives me nuts about watching Russ play is like that you cannot, and this drove me nuts even when people thought Seattle had a bad offensive line, which like maybe they did, I wasn't ever watching that closely, but like there were a number of times where like the offensive line blocked it up just fine. And Russ would do some just wildly stupid shit in the pocket because that's what he does. And people would be like, and then he'd run around and make some crazy play, be like, oh my God, he has such a bad offensive line. He's still doing that. And it's like, well, the play was blocked up fine in the pocket. Russ just like doesn't know how to manage a pocket at all. Like he's legitimately one of the worst pocket managers in the league. I don't even think it's close. Which again, there's give and take to that. He's great outside the pocket. He's great breaking structure, and that's kind of his strength. But there are disadvantages, as you're going to see on this play. Like none of what he does here makes any sense with regards to managing the pocket. None of this. I mean, again, yes, you see that edge pressure, so in a sense, you do need to kind of like step up. But what you want to see here is just climb the pocket a little bit. You don't need to like play a game with 54. Your guys got him blocked up just fine. That's a good rep by the right tackle overall. So if you just, and again, you'll see Metcalf, this play works exactly as it should. If he just hits the top of his drop, climbs the pocket like a normal human being, and then just throws this, you're fine. Again, you see that interior pressure, but all this is because he's so frantic. He's not, you could just climb this, slowly throw the ball. But he instead drops down, starts basically running forward, which is why then he has to hitch back. And the whole time, Metcalf is wide open. It should have been a first down. Instead, it's not, and they have to kick a field goal. Watch it from the end zone angle. You can see what I'm talking. I mean, I think actually in some ways that angle was better, but for this play, because you could see the depth. But you don't want to be running up the pocket in that situation. I think, and again, you just Metcalf this play could not have worked better. This play could not have been a better call. So you're talking about changing the offense, changing the play caller. It's tough to run a let's throw the ball all the time offense when your plays work this well and your quarterback can't execute them. Last one here. I know it's just a handful of plays, but I mean, it's one game for one, so there's only going to be so much volume that I can show. And I think this is again just consistent with who Russ is as a player, at least in my opinion, and why it's so difficult to let Russ cook, so to speak. I don't, I don't think Russ is actually bad, but this is why I've never felt like he was on the same level as the Cam Newtons, the Patrick Mahomes, the Aaron Rodgers, like those kind of guys. And you'll see here, I mean, this is funny because it turns into a touchdown, but I think it's a good example of like just kind of how frantic his play is, how disorganized his play is, how and I kind of alluded to this before. I just feel like Russ has no feel. No feel for the game. I joked with a friend that he's got like his talent levels are all maxed out. He's great at everything in terms of just like the talent portion, throwing the football, running around, elusiveness, all that. But like his just feel for the game is so bad. And I think that's like counterintuitive to people because he plays well out of structure. But like that's why his feel is so bad because he has no ability to even have a relationship with guys in structure and a feel for like what they're going to do in structure. When the routes are going to come open, when if this isn't there, I can work to the backside, or if I have to drop my eyes for a second, I know where I'm getting back to. If I see pressure, I can just, calmly climb the pocket while working through my reads. Again, maybe that's just because he's short, but if you can't manage a pocket, which he just cannot, he's terrible at it. It is so hard to play within structure. And I think that's what a lot of his issues come back to is some combination of just not being able to manage a pocket and not having a feel for like how to, even if it's not as strict as people try to make structure out to be, how to even be creative within structure. It's all creativity outside of structure for the most part, especially when you're talking about downs where you actually have to make slightly more difficult plays. So I think it looks like the Rams are going to play 6 here. So basically, quarters to this side, half to this side. They're going to run some kind of like Seattle's going to run another one of these like 4-by-1 concepts. It doesn't even really matter what the 4-by-1, what the 4 is here. The Rams are going to cover it well. And it turns into a touchdown, obviously. But again, I think this is why you should evaluate quarterbacks based on their process. Is this doesn't make any sense. Any of what Russ does here doesn't make any sense. I mean, obviously the end result makes sense, but you'll see that we'll just run it slow. I'll run it again at full speed, and hopefully you can see what I mean by none of it makes sense, without me having to walk you through it necessarily, though I suppose that's the point of the video. What you'll see from guys who know what they're doing and who are operating within structure more effectively is they'll read this frontside concept. I think he's right. None of this is open. That's good. But he just hitches and looks at it and then kind of does this weird thing with his feet and then finally sees DK open and throws it upfield. That's great. And actually probably oddly enough, because he did such a bad job, it turned into a touchdown. But what you should see here is it's fine to maybe think about pulling the trigger and then put it down. But once you put it down, you should know, okay, time to get to my backside concept. It takes him forever to get there. And even in, this is a little unfair, it's in slow-mo, but he does so much weird stuff and jumping around, and then finally he sees DK, and then he throws it. DK's open the whole time. If he just sees this frontside concept, oh, it's not there, works his footwork, I can't show you, but basically just turns his body, just starts moving his feet and turning his body, then he can just throw to DK who's wide open. Instead, it sort of ends up being like almost like a scramble drill play, even though he shouldn't need to scramble. And again, this is well protected, which he was for a lot of this game. There's a lot of talent up front for the Rams, but there was a lot of plays you saw. I mean, he's protected well enough to make these plays. I mean, he's completely clean, but look at that. I mean, again, there's so much just breaking structure, dropping eyes, and then having to reset and redecide. It's almost like you're reset, like the play has to start over again because he just, and then everyone has to kind of work around the fact that he can't work through the concept. And again, I'm not a guy who I think people don't do a good job of criticizing quarterbacks with regards to structure, but there's just not really much denying it with Russ. And I hope what I've showed you kind of proves the point, so to speak. But again, if you feel like I'm off here or you feel like I'm not giving Russ enough credit, please let me know. But again, I think these are the real limitations and why I think if you're his offensive coordinator, it kind of drives you up a wall because how are you supposed to run a consistent pass offense when your guy can't do kind of the basic stuff that you want from an NFL quarterback? Yeah, he can do all this extraordinary stuff too, and when he's hot, he's basically unstoppable. I don't disagree with that. Um, but what makes Steph Curry great isn't that he gets hot. What makes Steph Curry great is that he's an offense all unto himself in terms of how he structurally affects the defense, how he plays within structure and a dynamic structure that Steve Kerr helped them build, where he's making terrific decisions. He's using the threat of his shot to create offense for others. It's like if Russ was Steph Curry as a shooter, but had none of the brains and none of the ability to use that to influence the defense within a structured offense that allows other players to make plays off of him. He's not a point guard, for lack of a better word. He doesn't really see the game like that. I don't think, and I think most importantly, doesn't have a feel for the pocket, which is such an important thing at the NFL level. The ability to make plays from muddy pockets, from with pressure, not dropping your eyes just because you sense that someone might be coming free from a block. And you saw in this video, I mean, that's just a huge issue for him. There's so much just like resetting, 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 resetting. And as a teammate, you need guys to be consistent, and you need to kind of have an understanding for what they're going to do. Unless Russ is outside the pocket, it's so hard to predict what he's going to do if you're playing with him.